Hayden. And we're now live streaming on Facebook. Thank you, Ashley. It's brilliant.
Cool. Welcome everyone. Hey, John, thanks for having me on. It's always good to be a part of the Coach Training EDU community. It's exciting to be here. It's definitely some interesting times we're living in right now, and I'm learning just the skill set and the tools that we have as coaches and what we do for our clients is needed now more than ever. Well, in terms of my coaching journey, I can't believe it's been 9 years ago. I think it's been 9 years ago when I first started my coaching journey with Coach Training EDU, and that was when it was just academic life coaching at that time. And we didn't even have Zoom back then, John. Everything was done via that thing called a telephone, if you recall. But but it was 9 years ago that I started my coaching journey, and I discovered academic life coaching because I had been working with youth at the time, mostly as an SAT tutor. And I really wanted to find ways to empower them more to find more purpose and fulfillment in what they were doing in school. And I was working with mostly really like driven and ambitious, young adults, and they wanted to get into the most prestigious colleges and get the most perfect SAT and ACT scores. But when I started to really ask questions of them more about their passions and kind of the person they wanted to become, they had no idea. They were very good at answering test questions, but did not know how to answer questions about who they were, their values, what they believed in. And that really bothered me. And that led me on a search online to find a different way to serve that population. And that's when I stumbled across academic life coaching. And that's when I found John, and I gave him a call, and the rest is history. I got trained as an academic life coach with John over the telephone in one of his first courses. And then not long after that, John asked me to become a trainer. And then, from there, I helped John with developing the executive coach training program. And my transition actually from academic life coaching into executive coaching is which I primarily do now. I'm an executive coach and a leadership coach for high performance teams and high performance leaders. It all started with working with youth because the parents of the teenagers I was working with were noticing such great transformations in their kids. Like all of a sudden they were having such deeply profound and different conversations around the dinner table. And the parents were seeing their kids finding more fulfillment in what they were doing in school. And it was just magic that the parents are seeing. So the parents started asking me if I worked with adults, if I worked with executives, if I worked with teams, if I could come in and help motivate their managers. And I always say yes to opportunity. So of course I said yes. I actually didn't even have that much formal executive coach training at the time. But what I realized is that the life coaching skill set is applicable across the board, no matter the population. So while I was actually working with executives, I was getting further training, executive coaching myself, and getting further executive training tools under my belt. And I was co-designing and co-creating the executive coach program with John while I was already coaching executives. So that's kind of in a nutshell where I am now. And I was, training one of the trainers at Coach Training EDU. I don't know, 5-6 years. I don't even remember how long it's been. And just last fall, I'm taking a break from training, but I'm very happy and proud to still be on the advisory board and helping contribute to the ever-growing community at Coach Training EDU as much as I can.
Thanks, Hayden. It's just so good to feel your energy and hear you talk and to know that this is happening. You do a lot of work right now with executives. I know that you have a contract with a group of people who are in the hotel industry. What have you seen, or what's been going on in the last couple weeks? I mean, what have you noticed from your executive clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm in Los Angeles, so I do have clients who work in entertainment, and I do have clients who work in hospitality. And both of those industries are hit super hard right now. For those who don't know, all movie and TV production has been stopped. And in terms of hospitality, all travel and tourism is pretty much, stopped. And in California, we do have a formal stay at home, or, I guess it's called an ordinance or an order. So all non-essential businesses are closed, and I guess you could technically get fined if you were out and about doing non-essential stuff. So with that, yeah, my executive client who runs a hotel in Santa Monica they're doing okay. They're still open. Last time I talked to them, they were still open. I'm not sure exactly today what's happening because things are changing day by day. So the last I talked to him, they were open, and he was making a commitment to thinking about the type of leader he wanted to be, which comes back to what we're talking about today in terms of resilience. So all the coaching that we've been done in terms of helping him define the type of leader he wanted to be and how he wanted to make his team feel is all coming into play right now. So he did make the decision that all of those people all of them will have their jobs still, and they're going to find ways to make it work. And they're all figuring it out day by day together. It's definitely challenging, but it all comes back to he wants his team to feel heard and valued and collaborative at this time. And that was a lot of that is about the coaching. Is as coaches, we help our clients take time to stop and reflect on the type of person and leader they want to be. And there's no better time for that to come to the forefront than times of challenge, which is what we're experiencing right now.
Right. So Hayden, what are your favorite, like you personally, or as a coach, what have been your favorite tools in your toolbox?
Yeah. Question. John and I, when I was doing my master coach mentorship, when I had my mentor coach, something that I really learned, the bottom line here as coaches is the two biggest tools in our tool belt are powerful questions and offering insights, right? So even before I want to get into specific coaching tools for resilience, it's first asking our clients that powerful question: what is your relationship with resiliency? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really, really good question, is to help people start reflecting on how are they with challenge and bouncing back? How are they with their relationship with resilience and their relationship with resistance? So I think that's first and foremost a really good creating awareness, right? It's asking those types of questions of the type of qualities and skills that we need in this moment, right? Which I believe is resiliency, but I also believe we need creativity, innovation, and compassion right now. Those are just some things off the top of my head. But to ask clients, wow, what are some key skills that we need right now? And then asking our clients what they think their relationship with those traits are. So first and foremost, I think that's a really, really great insight, is to create that awareness in our clients. And when you called me and asked me to talk about some coaching tools for resilience, one of the great coaching skills that a lot of us use all the time, and we may not even realize we're using it as a tool, but it's the reframe, right? The reframe is so super powerful, and it's so super powerful now. And a lot of us are on Facebook a lot, and when we see a lot of posts that people are making about focusing on what's going well and focusing on gratitude, which is so true, but that's a coaching skill. It's a reframe. So being able to ask clients, what's another way to look at this, or what's a different way to look at this, or what's the more positive way to look at what's happening, and to get that's one of my go-tos. What about you, John? What are your thoughts on the reframe?
Yeah, I mean, the reframe to me it's a tool that it's just quick. And I think what you're speaking to, the heart of what you're speaking to is an increased mindfulness. It's the ability to recognize and ask, what kind of relationship do I want to have with resilience? Not just so I can solve the challenges that are presently here, or that we're going to experience over the next couple of weeks or months, but on a deeper level, how do I want to interact with any challenge in my life? And I think as a coach, what I think we're trained in, what we're trained to do is to look at each problem, any challenge, and it's almost like a muscle or a skill set, but to look at any challenge and to not get wrapped up in the details or the doom and gloom of the challenge, but to look at it as exercise equipment, going to the mental emotional gym, and really using these challenges as opportunities for us to develop that inner world.
Yeah.
That to me is what I see happening a lot on the coaching calls that I'm leading, coaching clients I'm working with, talks with the Moise, coach train EDU team. There's so much inner work happening right now. And that increased mindfulness, that increased awareness of simply just being asked the questions of how do you even want to begin to relate to this? Just that question alone increases awareness. That's powerful. It's a really powerful thing. And I think that's what you're speaking to. And so my favorite tool with Reframe, it's a quick, fast tool that helps you think more mindfully about this perspective that you really want to go for, that perspective that you're really leaning into. And so that to me is the power of Reframe, what you're talking about.
As you were speaking there too, John, about mindfulness, it made me also realize resilience is a skill set.
Right.
And it's important that as coaches, we remind our clients that resilience, it is a skill set, like riding a bike, right? And the more intention and practice you put into a skill set, the better you get. I guess it goes to the growth mindset, right? Where resilience and growth mindset go hand in hand, right? A fixed mindset around resilience would be, well, I'm just not a resilient person, and that's just the way it is. The growth mindset is like, being aware of your current relationship with resilience, but also knowing that with intentional practice, that skill set can get better. It is a muscle. It is working that muscle. I've been working on this project with some neuroscientists I told you a little bit about, and I just talked to them today about the neuroplasticity of the brain, how the brain is endlessly plastic. It's endlessly being able to form new neurons. And the skill set of resiliency, there's a part of our brain that has a little area for resiliency. And the more you put effort into it, there's more neural pathways created for your skill set of resiliency. So I think that's really important to let our clients know that if they have the desire to be more resilient with effort, they can and will be.
Love that. I've been doing a lot of research lately on the power of visualization, especially as it applies to athletes in sport. And there's been so many where so much research done on the specific aspects of a visualization from perspective. Like, are you third person perspective, first person perspective? Are you seeing it as a movie or as a series of snapshots and pictures? So much research has been going into the specific aspects of visualization and how that matters in the performance of the athlete. And one of the most major factors of the power of this visualization is the practice that the athlete has when they are engaged in visualization. That the more an athlete engages in visualization, the more they're able to, the more benefit they get from it. And that's one of the biggest factors, is the belief that there is that mind and body connection and emotional connection. And now we can see it. We can measure it. You can literally measure the impact that an athlete is having on visualization to the neurons doing the same pattern of firing just in the visualization than when they're going out and doing the actual activity. It's our minds are so powerful, and these ideas that we're able to it's in the connection between, you know, imagination, emotion, ideas, and motor function. It's real. You know, I think what you're speaking to is this idea of resilience truly being something that you can practice and become a skill set, you know, something that really does become stronger with more use.
Which you just touched upon another coaching tool for resilience, right? Is vision,
Right.
right? You know, like you said, with athletes, envisioning them crossing the finish line, or athletes envisioning them on the, you know, first place of the Olympics, their brain is doing something, you know, wild when that's happening. So the same thing with resiliency, asking our clients to really ask them to envision, you know, who do you want to be by the end of this? Like, imagine who you're growing into, you know. And then the coach training EDU, we talk about learn, be, do, right? So it's like, what do you hope to learn from this? What do you envision you're going to learn from this? What do you envision you're going to become from this? And really flesh out with them a clear picture of that vision of how we're all going to be stronger, smarter, more loving and compassionate as a result of this. And to really see that in your head is very powerful, right? Is to be able to have that vision of, you know, where we're going to be 6 months from now, and how we're going to be grown into a better version of ourselves is pretty cool. So
Right. And the idea of vision too, I think that what goes hand in hand with that is to create a reminder of the vision, because it's so easy to get, it's almost like there's a tug of war happening between the doom and gloom of media and, you know, external news, which is there. I mean, there's no real, I mean, we could ignore it, but it's part of life. It's there. And on the other hand, the ability to craft a meaningful, effective vision for ourselves, and to stay connected to that vision, find ways to lean into that vision, and be reminded of it. In the 1.0 training, we do vision recordings where you literally record the vision, like to see yourself 6 months from now, you know, with your phone memo, put music in the background, things like that.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite tools. I have albums of these things that I've created over the past, 15 years now. So it's that idea of the more you practice, and the more you practice the vision, the stronger it gets. It's just, it's a muscle, almost like anything else.
Well, I really enjoyed the visioning, you know, the vision exercise in 1.0, there's the audio recording, but then I think people have gotten creative over the years. You know, the more visual learners were making vision boards, right? Or having visual representations on their computer screens and stuff like that. And what I always, you know, suggest people do in their vision of their audio or visual representation of their vision is to include the qualities that they want to have, like characteristics, not just what they're doing or how much money they're making or their profession, which that's all well and good. But, you know, it's like the mindset they want to have, the qualities they're growing into, resilience being one of them, compassionate, mindful, right? Like, I think that's super important as well. And it kind of reminds me a little bit about this new term I recently learned, psychographic, right? Because oftentimes we hear about demographic, but there's also psychographic. And I think psychographic is oftentimes like we don't spend enough time with that, but I actually think that's more important than demographic. You know, a lot of coaches are on this call when they're crafting their ideal client profile, there may be a lot of demographic, you know, age, profession, male, female, stage in life. Yes, that's important. But I think psychographic, let's not dismiss that too, in terms of the qualities and the mindset that we want, not only in our ideal clients, but also trying, even right now with this, the unfortunate COVID-19 virus, like they're identifying a lot of the demographics of people who are the most affected by it But the ones who are doing well from it and recovering from it, I'm very curious what their psychographic is. Because I would imagine their research has been done that cancer survivors, their psychographic is more positive outlook, more optimistic, has a vision, is resilient. And we don't often spend enough time on that aspect of things. So I want to encourage everyone in your vision of yourself, your vision for your family, your vision of your ideal clients to really identify the psychographic that we want to create.
I love that. So what's the definition? What is the psychographic?
Yeah, I mean, it is a real word, you know, but I think the definition of it really is, I think the perspectives and mindset of that particular person, right? So I love this idea of psychographic, and I've really steered my business more into the psychographic of people than the demographic, right? So for me, it's, you know, highly positive people who are also very driven, also very high achieving, but also very passionate about always growing themselves, have a growth mindset, always want to be a lifelong learner in professional and personal growth. So that's a psychographic more than, you know, males age 40 to 65 in the entertainment industry. Like that has become less important to me, and psychographic, because I'm realizing that I do the best work and the most enjoyable work with people with the psychographic that I resonate with.
Wow. Wow. When you're working with people and they're stuck in doom and gloom, right? When they're here, what tools have you used, or what's the approach that you've taken in that?
Well, the first, I think one of the most important tools we've learned that have been very powerful for both my team clients and my executive clients is the assumption chart. I love the assumption chart as, you know, something, when I learned that on 1.0, you know, almost a decade ago, it was so powerful then, it's still powerful now. But one really cool thing though, before I dive into the specifics of the assumption chart though, is an acceptance though that our lizard brains have a negative bias, and that's just the way it is. And what I mean by that is, when I, you know, like I've been having this conversation with these neuroscientists, right? We're talking about lizard brain and the evolution of the brain. Like, you know, our lizard brain, that it is because we have evolved, you know, throughout history. But our fight or flight response, it's a real thing that if we didn't tend to have that negative bias that we were going to get eaten, we probably would get eaten, right? So our ancestors, it's in our DNA that we have a negative bias, that, you know, we tend to see things in a negative way for survival, right? But obviously we're not out there fighting, you know, woolly mammoths anymore. But it's accepting though that our brains tend to have a negative bias, like, and there's an evolutionary biological factor to that. So it's accepting that that's true, but also realizing that, like I said earlier, our brains are endlessly plastic and skill sets are endlessly plastic. So once you're aware and accept, okay, so as human beings, we sometimes tend to have negative bias, yes, but then also create awareness that you can change it. So with that said, the negative assumption chart for, you know, is, you know, that very simple cycle of when you identify an assumption, or, you know, that you have, it can lead to a perspective, right? So assumption, perspective, and perspective is usually linked to an emotion. And then that perspective and emotion leads to an action, and that action leads to an outcome or evidence, and that evidence will confirm that assumption. And like I said, we have a negative bias usually, especially towards unexpected things happening, or when there's some sort of stressful stimuli, we may tend to have a negative bias and go into the negative assumption chart, right? So it's first creating that, you know, showing so if anyone's on this call, I assume if they don't already have a copy of the assumption chart, they can get one by reaching out to Coach Training EDU. But I think it's so powerful, that graphic, to show our clients, like, yeah, we tend to have negative bias and we tend to have a negative assumption when something stressful happens. So let's identify, you know, like even with what's happening now, with what's happening in the world, you know, it's a very stressful stimuli. So it may be very easy to go into that negative space that I'm assuming that I'm, you know, gonna not get any clients ever again. And that, like, so that's the assumption, I will not get a client again. And that goes to the perspective. right? I would imagine the perspective would be a negative perspective, a stressful, anxious perspective, which leads to the action, right? If I'm in a space of negativity and anxiety, the action I would take around client creation would probably be nothing, or I would not really do anything new. I would not reach out to people. I would not market. I would not have a social media presence. And the evidence would be I'm not really getting any new clients, which confirms the negative assumption. Well, I told you in this time right now, I'm not going to get any new clients. And so that's what happens, right? But then to empower our clients, well, let's see what happens if we flip that. And we flip that negative assumption into something positive. And it's always important to remind our clients, though, like, let's suspend our disbelief.
Let me stop you there for a second, because Ashley and Matt, I know they're on. Could you send me in Slack the graphic? I can share the graphic while Hayden's going through it. It'd be lovely.
Good idea.
So, and then Hayden too, can you lead us through it? Like me as a pseudo client for the other people watching. Like, could we lead me and the others here through this?
Yeah,
I'll be a good client. I'll be like, I'll be, authentic.
Let's do it. Let's do some real life application of building real-time resilience right now.
Real-time resilience. And for those watching, I encourage you to also get a piece of paper and to answer these questions for yourself as well. And we'll leave some space for it.
Yeah. And on that piece of paper, I mean, if we don't get the, hopefully we'll get the graphic in time, but it's really simple. It's just, on your piece of paper, it's a rectangle and you divide it into 4 squares. So it looks like 4 window panes. That's all it is. And on the upper left-hand corner is where we identify the assumptions. So John, with this, crazy new world order happening right now, this chaos, like, talk me through some, maybe some negative assumptions that are coming up for you, and what's happening. Let's talk me through a little bit of that.
Right. I think it's interesting. I feel like here I got it here. I just want to say I really deeply appreciate the team at Coach Training EDU. I just got 3 different graphics from 3 different people.
Nice.
Yeah, I just want to express gratitude for that. And it's an interesting juxtaposition to be asked. So what are your negative assumptions right now, at the same time feeling so much gratitude for the team and for you and this whole community? So I'm just coming in with a lot of positivity at this moment. And on the other hand, there is in terms of negative assumptions, let me tap back into that, because that's also very real, is this feeling that everything, like society as we know it, is going to be fundamentally changed. It will never be the way it is. This is going to, this is serious doom and gloom. And the economy is going to evaporate. Yeah, that's the negative. I can feel the descent of negativity, even in the space now as I'm talking. Yeah, and then so the idea is now is to contract, see how you can save, basically go into full cactus mode and try to conserve as much resources as possible while spending as little as possible. Yeah, I could see that perspective come up very strongly.
I just want to point out, it's even interesting, Sean, even when you had that shift from, you had that great gratitude for your team, which the team is awesome, then shifting to the doom and gloom, like there's this energy shift in you, which was so evident and palpable. Like it was quite fascinating how your energy shifted and your body language changed. But yeah, we're starting with the box on the left, right? The assumptions. So the negative assumptions you are referring to is, if we were to pick one, what's one assumption we want to isolate to flesh out a little bit? So what's the specific negative assumption?
Specific negative assumption is that, things are going to be very bad. Just they are, yeah, things are going to increasingly get even worse. Yeah.
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 Just pause for a second. We're gonna isolate that assumption, which things are gonna get very bad. But what I'm pausing is like, if I were to, why are we laughing? What's
It's
laughing
just
about?
so heavy, Hayden. It's just, I mean, you
Well,
look
it is heavy,
about this. I mean, it's such an interesting, I mean, what I feel, this is what I feel like happens in coaching world so much is there's this feeling of, and I just came from a class, I just led a 2-hour class. It was our last session. And I mean, that's just our last sessions in a 6-month course are just a lot of emotion. And especially given the environment that everything's at. And I mean, I've been coaching and being coached since, my mid-20s. It's been a while. And I sometimes, I mean, when I really lean into like what coaching means to me and like how I feel like, what we're trying to do and explore these ideas and share them, it feels like as a collective, like what's happening now, this huge paradigm shift that's happening in our society right now. I feel even more strongly than ever that the concepts that we're talking about, like empathetic listening, raising awareness, neuroplasticity, even this idea of mindfulness around assumptions, being able to recognize subtle shifts of energy and go into these different perspectives and different assumptions. All of this work now is more, it's even more important now than ever before.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to feel this assumption chart and to go mindfully into the negative, because I that's what I'm recognizing right now. I feel like not human nature, the negative is there, but I feel like everyone, myself included, tries to get away from it. We try to move away, and now we're going directly into it, even deeper into it. It feels like going into dangerous territory. But I know that here you're holding space as a master coach, that this is also the value of coaching, is to go into this negative space with someone by your side who can basically create insight.
Yeah.
And to use the negative as we just talked about, this gym equipment, to gain these insights. So that's what's happening. That's a lot of emotion, Hayden.
It is. And I honor you and acknowledge you for the vulnerability. I didn't know we were going to be doing a real live demo here. So
in our plan on this, we chatted a little bit, and this feels like it's in this.
But I want to use this as a teachable moment, since I would imagine most people on this call are coaches. So this is a real life teaching moment for everyone on the call. I wanted to pause the assumption chart for a second to bring light to something that's happening in my client right now. Something's happening in John. There's an emotional response happening. So a lot of times with coaches, I have a decision point to make as a coach. Do I continue to force the assumption chart, which would be about the tool, or do I serve the client, which is to see what's happening with John? And so I'm inclined to actually ditch the assumption chart to really see what's happening in John. But I want to actually ask John where he wants to go with this. Do we further, explore what you're feeling, or do we go back to the assumption chart, which is because we were trying to teach resilience tools on this webinar, but at the same time, I want to show some of this intuition we have as coaches. It's because it's never about the tool. It's not about the tool, it's about the client. So what would serve you most in this moment? Because I see things coming up in you.
It's interesting because I feel the tug, and this often happens when you're doing assumption charts, between the negative doom and gloom perspective, or let's say the negative assumption. And then on the other hand, there is also this very, like, I feel that there's so much power in human resilience. Like the human, like we are tremendously resilient. I believe in the power of human creativity, of love, of connection, of being able to be vulnerable and strengthen that vulnerability and strengthen these connections, I can feel the tug both ways in this chart. And I think that's what in this space, there is this tug between how much do we allow ourselves to go into that negative spiral? You know, how much do we allow ourselves to mindfully go in there and sit and be with the pain? And then how much do we design these structures to move beyond it, or maybe even move through it? And I think that in the coaching world, and even in positive psychology, like some of the, you know, the next evolution of positive psychology, some of the research out there, it's pointing to the benefit of being able to sit with pain without reacting to it with the same instinct, you know, the same mindless instinct to either fix it right away or get over it. That's what I'm feeling, you know, and going in this space, it's powerful. Yeah, it's a powerful place. So we can run the tool. Let's go through let's go to perspectives, because this is.
So before we go back into so thank you, John, I gave you this is interesting right now because, you know, I love this, by the way, but it's kind of turning into like I'm coaching you as well as teaching coaching, and like I'm serving you and also serving all the participants at the same time.
Let's do it.
But what I want to make a note of is, if the participants are watching in the session, there's an opportunity to ask the client which direction he wanted to go. Because I saw that all of a sudden there was two directions: either just straight up me, go up through the chart and ignore that he had an emotional response, or check in with his emotional response to see what's happening there, and then ask him, what direction do you want to go? So he wants to finish the chart. All right, we're going to do that, because you always serve the client and you always go with where the client wants you to go. Before we go back into the chart there, John, I gotta bring this up too, because as you know, I'm also an Enneagram specialist, right? And I gotta bring up that I know you're a 7, right? We've talked about you are a 7. And for those who are not familiar with the Enneagram, there's 9 personality motivation types, and the type 7 is known as the enthusiast or the enthusiastic visionary. And their 7, their core motivation is they want to experience a lot, they want to see the best in everything, and they want to avoid pain. So it's just interesting that, you know, John, as a 7, that it's coming up for you that it's very uncomfortable for you to go into the negative because you want to avoid it. And I just want to bring awareness and insight to that I see that happening, that your 7 is coming out a little bit. How does that land with you?
I mean, it's in this, it's there. And I think that, I mean, what I'm feeling is that in these tools here as a, you know, coach, trainer, client, you know, all of it, person, being able to sit with the ouch it's like another skill set. Being able to sit with the ouch mindfully, and then to be able to recognize the pattern is something I see a lot in the clients and the coaches in training right now. The last 2 weeks, it feels like an exercise of sitting with what is, and then also moving towards what could be, and asking mindfully, what is that? You know, how much do I need to sit with what is? How much do I work towards what could be? That's essentially what we're doing. You know, that's what this chart is about in situations like this. So I want to be I want to give the experience, give, you know, an idea of how this tool could be used. So yeah, let's keep it going. I'll be imagine me, Hayden, as like a pseudo, how do we say it? A pseudo instrument of, you know, what this might look like working with a client. I can hold space, you know, as presenter and client at the same time. Done this many times.
Yeah, well, let's share we can share the chart again. And while you do that, I want to acknowledge that, you know, that there is uncomfortability, you know, going into the negative. But I want to ask you, John, what is the gift of going through the negative?
Hayden, that's a lovely question. I think what it is when it's like a really good cry, at the end of a really good cry, there's that feeling of emotional release. And I think part of it is, there's pain on one hand and then there's fear. And I think when sitting with pain, what tends to happen afterwards is the fear goes away because there's a realization that there's resilience there, that at our core as human beings, we are very resilient, and we can trust that in ourselves, that putting ourselves in challenging situations, we are designed to rise to meet them. And I think that's what happens. That's the gift, I think, of sitting with the pain. So let's keep going. So perspectives. Let's go back in the doom and gloom, right? The perspectives that come up. I think, doom and gloom is the name. That's the perspective, right? And then the action steps.
Well, what emotions are tied to doom and gloom? You're trying to go through this fast. You really want to get through.
I'm looking at the time. And we're doing it all. We're doing it all.
Yeah. But what is the emotion tied to doom and gloom?
Negative. I think, and what I'm seeing too is a lot of just challenge, apathy, fear. People are stuck with their families in tight spaces and feeling annoyed at each other. I heard that a number of times on these coach training calls last couple of weeks. I think people are still adjusting, all of that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety and fear on what I'm hearing from these perspectives.
So then in that space of the doom and gloom perspective and emotions of anxiety and fear and some annoyance, what actions would that lead one to take?
Fear-based actions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which isn't, there's some use to that as well. It keeps us safe to some degree, right? But fear-based actions, not maybe action steps that aren't necessarily in alignment with that vision that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's a way to say it. Getting stuck in watching the news and feeling worse. Things like that.
And then with taking actions that may be fear-based and not in alignment with the vision of who we want to become, including watching the news all day, what evidence might that lead to as a result of those actions?
Right. The evidence that, it's just is, fewer coaching clients, fewer opportunities, feeling really bad, and then feeling bad that, wow, I wasted time in this, and feeling even bad about that. It's feeling bad about feeling bad. It feels like there can be an endless cycle here, which supports this negative assumption chart.
And then all of those outcomes then, of course, confirm the assumption that this is going to get really bad.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I'm mindful of time too, but obviously that negative cycle which went through is not a useful place that you want to be in to get to that vision of who you want to be. So if we were to go into the positive in this, right? So if we were to take that negative assumption and you might not need to believe it yet. In fact, we can suspend our disbelief, right? You might not believe it yet, but what is a positive way to look at what's happening? What's a positive, empowering assumption we can make about what's happening right now?
Right. One that I see most from the coaches in training and people I've been looking at and working with, there's a belief now that this paradigm shift, this change in the paradigm, provides an opportunity. That there are opportunities right now to move forward both personally and professionally. And that in times of great change like this, there's also, increased, a heightened sense of, how we respond really, will have a leveraged effect on what comes out, a year or two from now.
Yeah. So I love that. So the positive assumption is that there's new opportunities here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one that I designed with my coach and been really leaning into.
No, that's a great one.
This is a pre-designed
well, I mean,
example of the exercise, right?
Well, but I see. So, what's the perspective that when you're in this assumption of, all right, there's what opportunities are there? This is opportunity time. What state of mind is opportunity?
Right. I mean, this one, the one that I've been is curiosity. It's basically it's moving. If we were to look back at the negative assumption chart, right, the negative one, I think the perspective fundamentally is one of judgment and one of negative judgment. The perspective here, and with this positive, based on this positive assumption, I think is one on curiosity, looking at what is, not from necessarily a standpoint of judgment, which is there too, it's in the space, but really leaning into becoming curious and asking, how can I be of service? How can I help? What would be the most useful thing I can offer right now?
And from that space of curiosity and asking yourself, how can I be of service right now? What actions does that lead
to? We, as an organization, this webinar series, even this conversation, the conversations that we've had leading up to this call, Hayden, like those action steps that we're talking about, Coach Training EDU is launching a couple initiatives here in the next couple of weeks, and I'm genuinely excited about the future when thinking about what this paradigm shift means to humanity. I think there are going to be some extreme positives that come out of this. This might just be me and my optimistic 7 self. I get this. I totally understand this. But I do see that there is hope, and there is the way that people are coming together, and the way that people are rising to this challenge is provides a lot of hope.
And with these actions of trying new things, creating different actions that you wouldn't have taken otherwise, what's the evidence?
What's the results? Yeah, I mean, this comes from you, right? This is one of the things that if you do the same things, then you always get the same results, right? But if you do different things, you get different results. Yeah. I mean, this is Hayden Lee. This is,
yeah.
I hear this in my head in your voice, Hayden. This is what I hear. That's what comes out of this. I know different things are going to come out of this. Yeah, absolutely. Hayden, thank you. I know we chatted about this, what this might look like, and what, the assumption chart and the assumption tool. Thank you. Thanks for playing and jumping on this and, playing in this space. Let's open up to some Q&A. And we have about 10 minutes left. This is perfect. See, so participants at this webinar community, if you went to, do we have any questions? Or do you have any questions about?
Yeah, so people can type, questions in the box, or maybe questions, insights, what they've noticed, what they liked, what they didn't like, things to clarify, anything. And while people are typing away, John, I acknowledge you for, playing along as well and for being open. And yeah, I didn't really know where this was going to take us, but like as coaches, it's about dancing in the moment, and that was quite a dance.
It was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think one of the things I really appreciate about even this conversation on resilience is the way that even like the etymology of resilience comes from a Latin word solere, which means to dance. And literally resilience is the idea is dancing. It's being able to bounce back. So the resilience isn't it's not a static thing. It's a motion, it's the ability to respond and keep moving. So wait, we have our first question. We have our first question.
Yeah, well, we have does the initial negative assumption need to be a neutral statement? Do you want to take that?
Go for it, Hayden. Yeah.
Well, I think I think she may be referring to in the book. Like, I think in the book, I think that does refer to it being a neutral statement. But in my case, when I use it, not necessarily. I mean, I actually do have I have them come up with the real life negative assumptions. But when I use the neutral statement, sometimes is if they're having a hard time, maybe coming up with an extremely negative or an extremely positive assumption. So then we can go with like a neutral statement. But yeah, I personally don't use the neutral as much. I mean, what about you when you personally use the assumption chart?
Right. But when using an assumption chart, a neutral statement isn't as important as when you're working with perspectives. And this has come up a couple times with so when working with perspectives, yes, it's important to have a neutral topic because you want to have a space for clients to go with a negative perspective, a neutral perspective, a positive perspective. And if that initial topic has too much negativity or positivity baked into it, it's hard to have flexibility in exploring different perspectives. What the assumption chart does is let's say the topic is the future, right? Or, the present, the present challenge. Yeah, it's not as important that the topic be neutral because the tool's designed to go negative and then positive. So you already have the two paths of the perspective that you're going to take at the same time. And that's useful for a tool. That's a great question too.
Joe, are there resources you'd recommend, for example, books to help us build resilience in ourselves and others around us? That's also a great question. The first thing that came up, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but I know in our 2.0 class, we talked about grit, and grit and resilience go hand in hand. Angela Duckworth, TED Talk about grit is really good. I love this. I think she wrote a book about grit. I haven't personally read the book about grit, but I love the TED Talk about grit. I also love Mindset, obviously, by Carol Dweck. It's become very popular. Growth Mindset, Fixed Mindset. One of my favorite books is Drive by Daniel H. Pink. It really is about what motivates us as human beings, and resiliency ties right into that. It's finding something that drives you, that you're willing to be gritty and resilient for, and that's super important. In a nutshell, Drive is about finding something that you love to do, making time to do it, learn how to do it well, and do it for a cause greater than yourself. When you're able to find that drive, you will be willing to walk through the fire for that. What about you, John? Any favorite books on resiliency, grit?
I think I'm just reading the comments here, the chat comments as well. I like anything from the Arbinger Institute. I'll type it in here, Arbinger. There's a couple that are, leadership and self-deception, and then Anatomy of Peace. I really enjoy Anatomy of Peace. I feel like that's my go-to book in times like this because it just helps. It talks a lot about having a heart at peace where you're able to see yourself in the other person, or see those characteristics of yourself in someone else, and vice versa. And to me, it just reminds me that all of humanity we all share the same hopes, fears, and desires. Like we're all in this same boat together. And that's to me the Arbinger Institute that I really appreciate. Let's see another question here.
What did you learn? This is good. About you personally, like what did you learn about your resiliency through the assumption chart?
There we go. Yeah, this one here, like what do we do in our, like what do I do in my daily lives? Like what do I learn?
No, well, that's a separate question. Someone asked specifically, John, what did you learn about your resiliency through the assumptions exercise?
There we go. I think um, so that's an excellent question. I mean, I could go on for 5 minutes on it. A lot comes up. What I learned is that, I mean, my big takeaway, and it feels somewhat meta, is I realize how much of my minute to minute, day to day is influenced by these coaching tools, and how it's almost impossible for me to separate myself from the coaching tools because they're just integrated so much into my life, that I realized, wow, like I can see the power of these tools. Yeah, I mean, I just see the power. Like that's what I learned about myself, is how into it I am. Like, I guess that's the way, especially like sharing, with, a number of people.
And then someone else mentioned flexibility and ability to adapt is important. Yeah, and I totally agree too. I think when it comes to helping, maybe when our clients are working on resiliency and asking them, what is your relationship with resilience? What skill sets do you want to work on right now that are important to you? I definitely think adaptability and flexibility are part of resilience. And then having, I mean, once again, like for all of these characteristics that we're identifying that help us through hard times, it's using direct communication to ask your client, what is your relationship with flexibility? What is your relationship with adaptability? How resilient are you? How resilient would you like to be? How flexible are you? How flexible would you like to be? What do you need to learn to be more flexible? So we can totally use the Learn, Be, Do framework and ask questions around all these characteristics that help with coping.
And you're totally doing the MCC coach thing, Hayden, where you throw out 15 really good, powerful questions, like rapid fire, like that. All the questions you just asked very quickly, you could ask any one of them and give 5 minutes, and still it would be useful to go through it.
Yeah. So do not stack questions in real life.
What do you use, Hayden? Your last question, in your daily life, and we'll end here. In your daily life, what do you use? Like, what's the one or two things that you do to maintain resilience?
Well, I think like you said, also, I think, being that we have the great fortune to do this work all day, every day for a decade and more now, it's so ingrained in us. But I think, in terms of emotional regulation, it's like it was very tough for me this past week. Like, it's been a whirlwind of ups and downs every day. Got more and more kind of breaking news. That's kind of bad news. But something I do for myself personally on the day-to-day is I identify how do I feel, how do I want to feel, and what can I do to feel my desired emotion. So it really is, I check in with myself, and also being real with yourself if you're ready to take any action towards feeling how you want to feel. So the last week, I really was in a funk. I really was. So I identified, how did I feel? I felt unmotivated, I felt in a funk, and I felt sad. And how do I want to feel? I knew that I wanted to feel motivated again. I wanted to feel excited again. But you also have to be asking yourself, am I ready to feel that way? And I wasn't. So I allowed myself self-grace and self-compassion to feel like a little bit down for a couple of days. And it was actually really great. I mean, it was great to feel down because I allowed myself to feel down. But then I knew that I asked, or what actions do I need to take to feel how I want to feel, which is, like I said, excited and motivated again. And the actions that I decided to take is this: engage with my community again, take action, serve. But I wasn't ready to put myself out there and serve last week yet. So I guess on the day-to-day, I invite everyone to really check that mindfulness John was talking about. Check in, how am I feeling right now? Is this how I want to feel? How do I want to feel? What actions can I take to feel that way? But don't forget to also ask yourself, am I ready to take action to feel that way? Because if you're not, that's okay too. We got to have self-grace and self-compassion. So yeah, so I think that helps with resiliency too, is being very aware of how you feel and it's okay if you're not ready to take action to feel resilient. That's part of resilience, actually, the journey. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Hayden. It's just so great to hear your energy, hear you talk, hear you work through it. And thank you for your vulnerability, for really being you, holding space and doing what you do. And with that, we are completing our first webinar in this Resiliency series. So thank you, Hayden.
Yes, thank you,
everyone
John.
watching.
Thank
It's
you,
a
everyone.
pleasure. We will do more of these. If you have suggestions or ideas of other topics you'd like to see, let us know. But thank you really, truly for being here and being part of this community.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.